Welcome everyone to our webinar on Matboard pricing and profit. We're going to start out with FrameReady, and then we're going to take a look at some other handouts that we have today. So to start with, we're going to go into the price codes file, and over here on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that Matboard is already up and visible. Just want to point out that this blue box on the left-hand side of the screen is the wholesale list price from the suppliers that we are provided with. And we're basing our pricing on this amount in this box. Now, some people say that they don't use the supplier list price, they get a discount. If you do get a discount, there are two ways that you can deal with that. One is that you can go over to the discount field over on the right-hand side, put in the discount, and that's going to give you a discount to show what the true value of your inventory is. However, some people say they want to base their retail prices on the discounted price. My recommendation is that you wouldn't do that because now you're giving your discount away blindly. But in some cases, people need to do that because they're promoting themselves as a discount frame shop, or they're promoting themselves based on price. Another option that you can do is if you go back to the main menu, and when you are updating your vendors, if you want to change that number that's in the blue box, what you would do is click on the supplier that you're working with, and at the top right-hand corner, you'll see the foreign exchange button. And that button will allow you to put in the exchange rate. If you had a 10% discount, you put in 0.90 and then click proceed. And of course, it would change all of the costs in here. So that is an option available to you if you want to change the wholesale costs that are in FrameReady. You do need to do that every time that you update your vendor though. And as I said, it's not a recommendation. I would recommend that you would stay with the list price because your discount that you're receiving is your profit for purchasing wisely. And you don't want to give that blindly away to the customer. So let's talk about the markups that we have available in FrameReady. So your markups. There is no one pricing structure that's going to fit everyone. We do have a default structure in FrameReady. It's a starting point, but we do expect you to go ahead and change it, modify it, because you need to decide. If you're on the East Coast or the West Coast, you're going to have a different markup. And even if you're located in the same city as someone else, you could be in a high-end neighborhood or you could be next to a discount section. And so your prices are going to change based on what your overhead is as well. Also, how are you promoting yourself? Are you promoting yourself on quality, service, how fast you're going, or the price? So those things are going to factor or affect your markups that you're charging your clients. The other thing that you need to consider is, where do you want to position yourself? Do you want to be the most expensive? Do you want to be the least expensive? Do you want to be in the middle or just above that? So you want to position yourself knowing what your competition is. And the way to know what your competition is to do some competitive intelligence. And that's not just finding out what the other companies around you, the other frame shops, are who your competition is, what they are charging, but also what do they not do that you do. So that is your USA, your unique selling advantage. So do you do needlework that they don't? Do you do oversized pieces? Do you do shadow boxes but the competition doesn't? One of the framers actually said that what they did was they were working with a competitor and said, hey, these are the things that we do, but I don't handle this. So they actually worked together to send the customers over to each other based on what they were able to do and what they weren't willing to do. So the next question is, what are your customers willing to pay? And don't base that on what you yourself are willing to pay or what the people at the front counter, the sales people, are willing to pay. Don't sell yourself short on that. If you don't have any customers walking out, nobody's complaining about your pricing, nobody ever asks for a discount, maybe your prices are a little bit too low and you can afford to raise some. One gentleman wisely said that if you were to increase all of your items by just $1, each frame was increased that you sell is increased by $1. At the end of the year, you'd have money to reinvest back into your business, whether it's new signage or training or new equipment, and nobody's going to complain about $1. So don't be afraid to increase your prices. All right. And you'll just find out what the level of resistance is when people are, start to say, oh, wow. If you get too many people saying that, maybe you have raised them too much. But if nobody is saying it, you need to raise them. Okay, you need to also cover your costs and check, what is your overhead, your wages, your utilities that you're paying for, your rent. All of those things need to be factored in, and you can use them, we have another webinar where we talked about you could use that in the extras to actually put something in there to cover the building utilities and everything. So that's an option available to you. But most importantly, we want to make sure that you're making a profit and that you're going to be around tomorrow and you're going to be able to continue to do the things that you enjoy doing, which is framing. So this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about. So a lot of pricing structures in the past were based on, because you didn't have a computer, they were based on the feel or the texture of the paper, because you could easily tell which paper mat this is, or it's an 8-ply mat. Now that's okay to start out with if you don't have a computer. A lot of the, I did a survey on the 8-ply mat boards and found that the range on the 8-ply mat boards went anywhere from $21 up to $53 at that time. So to have one pricing structure for something that's in that wide a range, you're losing money on one end and you're overcharging on the other. So the next structure that people came up with was to price by price ranges. But if you had too much space between your price ranges, it was very easy for you to be charged of the mat board increase just a tiny little bit, that suddenly the price would jump $20. And yet at the same time, if it increased $10, you're not going to change what you're charging. So the best way to do that is to actually base your retail prices on the cost, and it's the cost times a markup. And we use something called a sliding scale in here, and FrameReady has a sliding scale built in. You can change that, you can modify it. Some people are concerned about using a sliding scale simply because their feeling is that at the end of the sliding scale, at the bottom, those items aren't going to be making as much money for them as they could have been. And my suggestion is, if your markup is 3, then you're going to start out at a base of 3 and you're going to increase the sliding scale going up. Don't start out with the lowest, the smallest, most inexpensive mat being a 3 times markup and working it down from there. You want to start out with your base minimum and build upward. And if you're concerned that you're not going to be making as much profit, here's the evidence that says even if this was a $6 mat and you marked it up 4 times, your profit is going to be $17, $18 roughly. And this more expensive mat, which is marked up less at a 3 times markup, make a profit of $90. Even if this more expensive mat was marked up 2 times, you're still making $45 on it, which is more than you were making on the less expensive mat that you can mark up more. So that's why we want to use the sliding scale in FrameReady. The question is choosing your markup. When it comes to choosing your markup, you could be looking at a markup of anywhere from 2 times to 11 times. And I have worked with people who had an 11 times markup. And using that markup alone gives you a very steep, which is costing us $17.09, is being marked up 11 times, and it's going up to a very high rate for the full board, which is $190 for that mat. And yet, if you had a lower markup, when you look at the smaller sizes, you see that you're not even covering the cost of the mat until, well into the larger sizes. So you're not making, using that markup. And let's take a look at it on the chart here. You get a very steep incline based on the markup that you select. So choosing your markup is really important, and I consider it to be something like a Teeter Totter, and that's my way of explaining it, and that the Teeter Totter is more balanced on the incline if you have a lower markup. All right, but as we saw in the picture, the markup is going to mean that you don't make as much money on those items. So the solution is to use a set price, and the set price, I would explain that as the Fulcrum. And you can increase it by that $3, or you can increase it by $9. You can have a fixed amount on there. The set price was designed so that it would be something that would cover your labor, shipping, operating costs. All of those things would be combined in there. And the set price can either be a fixed number, or it could be a number that changes depending on the amount that the mat costs you. So that's where we have this formula. Now, the formula that we are using is actually originally created in a book called Pricing Custom Framing, and this book was written by Vivian Kistler and Bob Mayfield. And if you were to go on, Decor Magazine was the one that originally sold it. I believe it's still available out there, but you may need to look for it. And I can give out the ISBN number in the email that comes out at the end of the webinar. The formula that we use is, it's basically the wholesale cost divided by the total area. which is the width times the height. And then we multiply that by the united inch area. And that's something that was very specific in this book. United inch area isn't something you're going to go and be able to find on a search engine. United inch divided by 2 times united inch divided by 2. And then we take a markup and then we add on our labor charge, which we call a set price. So that's where that formula came from. So I'm going to minimize that, and we're going to go right back into FrameReady and take a look at how this works. Now that we know the theory of it, let's put it into practice. So FrameReady automatically comes up with a sliding scale markup, and you'll see that the formula, when we read it, starts out with the word case, saying if this is the case, and reading down the formula, and the cost is less than $6, which in this case it's not. If it was, then it would mark it up 4 times. And then it continues to go down the sliding scale. Okay, so it's more than 6 but less than 8, or is it more than 8 and less than 10? And it continues down until it finds the correct line, and then it uses that markup and it applies it to that one particular mat board. So this sliding scale can work to apply the correct markup to all of the mat boards in your database that you have from FrameReady. The old default markup that we had in FrameReady stopped at $44. However, there are a lot of mat boards out there now that are over $100 even. So the new defaults in FrameReady go up to the 200 mark. And if you have a newer version of FrameReady, all you need to do if you want to see it, add that in, is click on Install Program Defaults. You can say just for this record, and then you would be able to look at the program defaults that are in FrameReady and compare them to the program defaults that you are, or your custom defaults that you are currently using. So there's our sliding scale. One of the things that's really important in the sliding scale is to make sure that your markups are close together. If your markups are too far apart, if they're jumping all the way from, let's say, $5 down to 4.95, you're going to notice that your retail price is going to decrease. And I'm going to show you how that works. So if this markup was a 5 and the next one was 3.95, if you went from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2, so that's a big jump. And I'm going to change the price. I've already saved it up here so that I know what it is. But if the price of this item was $5.99, you can see over on the right-hand side that the retail price for a 32 by 40 is $33.33. Now, if the price increases 2 cents, which pushes it into the next bracket up here, so it's going to drop down, and when I click the outside that field, you'll see the markup has changed to 3.95, and the retail price, instead of being $33.33, is now dropped to $27.06. So when the price increases, you will lose money if your gaps are in your markup. So you don't want your markups to be too far apart. Take a look at them, make sure they're nice and close together so that you are not losing money when the wholesale cost increases. Very important. If you decide that you wanted to have a straight markup and that's the way that you want to price, that's fine, no problem. All you need to do, and I'm just going to do Control A, and I'm going to change this and say I want a 3 times straight markup. All my mats are going to have the same markup, and that's fine. You can apply that to all your mat board. Now, if you're playing with your markups, and I do suggest you go ahead and do some experimenting, go in, change them, modify them to suit your business area. But if you decide, oh, that's not what I wanted, you can always do one of 2 things. One is that you can go back to the Install the Program Defaults and choose that for this record, and it will put it back in. Or if you have special pricing for that particular item that you've already created, you can click on Lookup My Default, and that's going to put the pricing in that you have specifically for that supplier. So those 2 buttons will help you as you're working through your pricing to say it's okay for you to make changes, find one mat board to experiment with, and compare to the other mat boards. So looking at the markups that we have in here, and as I said, I'm going to go back to our FrameReady program default, and I'm going to remove a few things that we have in here. and take a look at the markup. Even if I had a sliding scale markup, it's going to have a range of markups for me that I can use depending on the cost of the mat. If I look over to the right-hand side of the screen in my price sampler, it's showing me what the retail price would be for some average sizes. So looking at these sizes, and that doesn't mean that these are the only sizes that it will price out. If this was a 9 by 10, it's going to change the price. So it's fine. These are just sample sizes. Okay, it's going to price out exactly to the mat board size. However, what I notice on here is that since this mat costs $19.74, I'm not going to make a profit until I sell something larger than a 16 by 20. So you should be making a profit at least by a 16 by 20. So there's something that we can do that's going to help us, and that is the set price. And that's going to solve this problem of the lower sizes. So just before we get there, Chrissy, it's time for your next poll.
How are your defaults set up? Select one or more of the following. Same formula for all mat board suppliers, different default pricing for different suppliers, or only use one mat board supplier.
And that's one of those options that you could have one formula that's applied to all of the different mat board companies, or you could have a formula that's applied just to Bainbridge, or just to Crescent, or just to Teeter.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share it with you.
Okay, yeah, so same formula for all suppliers, that's great. And some people do have a different one for, and sometimes that depends on where you're located and who you're ordering from, that you may need to add extra shipping on to one supplier and not the other. That's great. Thank you everyone for sharing. Excellent. So the next section that we're going into is the set price. Now the set price is the section that covers the labor, shipping, all the extras. And that's also the section that's going to help us to balance out the pricing here. So ordinarily, FrameReady would say, whatever the cost of the mat is, divide it by 2. And so the customer is actually paying for half of the wholesale cost of the mat board, base minimum. And then whatever area they're using, whatever size it is, that area is the one that is marked up and added into the total price. So the set price can be just one fixed amount. If you decided that I just wanted to charge $5 for all of my mats, I could do that. Or you could say based on the cost of the mat, divided by any number you want. We chose the number 2. We felt that was fair. They're paying for half of it, you're paying for half of it, and then the area they use is being marked up. And this is great because as the wholesale cost fluctuates, if it's a $8 mat, then you're going to have a set price of $4. If it's a $50 mat, you're going to have a set price of $25. So that changes with the wholesale cost. Now, there are a couple of functions that you can put in here, and a function is one of those little words that goes into the front of this. And you could add the word round in here and say that I want to round it off to the nearest dime. And now my $9.87 is going to go up to $9.90. Another function that you could use is the word ceiling. And ceiling is where you can round it off to the nearest whole number. There's no decimal for how many digits it's going to round off to. So this is rounding off now to the whole amount of $10 now instead. So you can use that. Another option that someone told me that they do, and that is that they don't use a markup at all. They simply use the set price, and they put their markup in here under the set price and say, I want the cost of the mat times 3, and they have the same retail price for every single size. And if somebody came in, they said, and wanted the dropout or wanted the rest of the mat, he said, fine, you paid for it, it's yours. But everybody prices differently. There's no right or wrong. The most important thing is that you are making a profit and that this is what your customers are expecting and you're able to sell your product. Now, one of the things that you could possibly do too is that if you decided you wanted to do this, but only for the mats that are 40 by 60, because once you go over the 32 by 40, you're using up basically the whole sheet of mat board. So you could take a formula like this and say, I only want to apply this to my 40 by 60 mats. And then what you would do is, once you've entered this in, hold down your mouse over top of the pricing options and defaults button, press down on the shift key on the keyboard, click once on that button, and now it's copied that formula in. And you can go over to the right-hand side of the screen and say, this is now going to be the default specifically just for all of the mats that are 40 by 60. And if it's just for one supplier, leave the supplier name in. If it's for all suppliers, take that out. Write in your date. What's the date that you set this up? Okay, and that you created it and you applied it to all of the mats. Why did you apply this, etc. Click on the Apply to Group button, and that would apply this formula to all of your mat boards that are 40 by 60 only. So that's another option for you. So I'm going to remove that one from my list, and let's go back. Because the other thing that we want to know is, what are the mats that you're selling? In the next section that we're going to look at in the pricing, there's a report that you can get from the work order screen in FrameReady. And if you go over to the print options button, and it's called Moulding Usage by Supplier. And if you were to click on that button, and I've got the molding usage report here, what it'll do is it'll give you a report based on all the molding and mat board. And I've specifically just done a section that has a lot of mat board in it for me, so that I could see if I have a certain mat that is my top sellers. A lot of people have their go-to white mat, their go-to black mat, and those are the ones that you might want to be able to buy in bulk, which is great benefit to you. I'm going to talk about those in-stock mats in a moment, but there also could be mats that you're only selling maybe a quarter of a sheet, which means that the rest of that mat is in stock still. And if you were not covering the cost of your mat that you purchased at a quarter of a sheet at least, then that means that all of these mats where you see it says 25, you have not made a profit on those. And that means that those mats have lost money for you. So you want to take a look at that report and see how many of those mats you are selling that are still have that small amount that was used, and the rest has gone into inventory and there hasn't been a profit, or which mats are the ones that you sell the most, and those should be the ones that you buy in bulk. So let's minimize that and come back here. Once you run that report, you now have information to go back into your price codes file and set up a few things. So the next section we're looking at is the minimum price. So if I go back and I install the program default, all right, just for this one record, and this is the section that we're looking at now. Because if you are not using the minimum price in FrameReady, that means that the amount for those smaller sizes, the retail price for those smaller sizes, could be less than the amount that you are paying for this mat to purchase it, which means you are not making any profit at all. So the min price gives you the ability to cover that cost of the mat. And if you just type in the word cost, that means you've covered the cost of the mat and you are now at zero. You are even. But our recommendation is that you would actually go in and add on with a plus sign, either $1, $2, $3, $5. The default formula in FrameReady is going to suggest that you put in $5 so that you're at least making something. Somebody had to order that mat. Somebody had to receive that mat. Somebody had to go and cut that mat. So to say that you made at least $5 on that is not too much. If you want to add more onto that, by all means, please do. Make sure that you are profitable. So we want to set that up and put that into your defaults. So in your default, you want to make sure that whatever the default is that you have, that minimum price has been added in, and you can apply it to all of the mats. Now, we also mentioned that some people will have those special mats that are their go-to mat. So let me go find that go-to mat. That's 1610, all right, the white mat. And what I've done is I've marked this as an in-stock mat. It has a special category. If there was a category in there already, I've removed the category and replaced it with the word in stock. And what that does is on my formula, I can go back in here and say, I don't want to have a minimum price on my go-to mats because these are the ones that are in stock. I use them over and over again. It's fine. I have a little small section here, and that's all right. This is not one of those mats that's my Congo green mat where I only ordered it in for a small piece, and now I'm stuck with this mat that I may never ever use again. So there's a difference between the mats you order in to match for that perfect design where you need to cover the cost on the smaller sizes and your in-stock mat that you're using over and over again. So because I've added in the word in stock and I've removed the minimum price, I don't want the minimum price to be added onto that item if I change my markups and apply it. So what I do is over here on the right-hand side, under the omit category, I've added in that word in stock, and make sure, use that drop-down list to make sure that it matches exactly whatever you've written in there. And you could type in anything you want. Make sure it's not something that's already being used by another category, but something that's unique. And do click apply to group, it's going to show me that it will apply it to all Matboard, but it's going to omit it from anything that says in stock. So those items will not receive the new markup. They're going to stay where they are. Okay, or you can go back here and say that I do want to put the new pricing in. I'm going to look up my default, and when I do look up the default for this, it's going to ask me, this is an in stock, are you sure you want to update this? I'm going to say yes. Okay, and then I can go back in, and if I want to, I can remove the minimum price on there. So those are the things that you can do with the minimum price. Over to the right-hand side, there are a series of circles here, and two of them specifically that you would use for Matboard. One is the United Inch area that we often use, and the other one is the square inch. And the difference between those two is very slight. However, if you were pricing by the United Inch area, if you take a look at the 72 United Inch, where it's $79.79, if I change it to square inch, the prices are going to go down just a little bit. So instead of $79.79, we're at $78.93. And this one was at $11.45 and is now dropped down to $11.40. So square inch is fine. It's in favor of the customer. United Inch is in favor of the framer. So we tend to use United Inch area for all of our Matboard pricing, and that's the default that we have set up in FrameReady. So when you do go to your pricing options and defaults, make sure one of those circles is marked, and if you have a preference, my recommendation would be United Inch area.
Which Matboard companies do you use? Arctic, Bainbridge, Crescent, Peterborough, or Rising? We're just about done voting, so I'm going to click poll up here and then I'll share results.
Oh, excellent. And here are our results. So Crescent's a popular one with everyone who's attending today, Peterborough, Bainbridge, and then a little bit of Arctic. All right. I know there are other Matboard companies on there. The poll only allows me to show 5, so that's why I selected those. Thank you, Chrissy. Excellent. So we've taken a look at Matboard, set price, and minimum price. The next one that we're going to look at now is the code tables. And there's a number of things that you can do with the code tables. In the code tables, if you have old price charts that you decide that I really want to stick with my old price charts, I'm not comfortable yet going into creating things in FrameReady, then you can do that. You can go over to the code tables button on the left-hand side, and usually you would have a code table, and I'm just going to go find one of my code tables up here. I think there's one that might be just an A2 per United Inch. So you have your United Inch measurements that would be on your chart that you had, and then you would add in whatever the price is. And you can just type the price in as you go through, and this would be to match your old existing price chart that you were currently using, which is fantastic. And if they change by price, the wholesale cost actually, then what you're going to do in setting this up, if you wanted to price by the code tables this way, is in the pricing options and defaults, not going to each not going to each Matboard and changing the Matboard amount and putting a code table in there. But what you're going to do is you're going to create a case here, so that in this it would say, if this is the case and the cost is less than this amount, you would create your Matboard 01 code, Matboard 02 code for each of the different price ranges that you have that you're using. And this gives you the ability to copy that old paper chart that you have to say, I want to follow the exact same one. The beauty on that is that you can change the cost amounts if you want. You can always go back to the code tables and increase them by a percentage. And if you decide that you wanted to increase one particular code table, you could do that simply by clicking on the adjust current table by a percentage. One individual code table. With this button, you can adjust all of the code tables with the button just to the left of it. All right, but if you're pricing your glass by that, it's going to adjust your glass tables as well. It is all of your code tables. So I'm going to go back now to the other options that you can use with the code tables. You can use them in combination with your markup, set price, and minimum price. And one of the ways that people might want to do this is they might want to say that I've got a 32 by 40 mat. I want to make sure that my staff only enters in this number for the 32 by 40 mat when they're on the work order. Because if I'm on that work order screen, and let's go to a new work order, and we've entered in something that working with the customer, and we've got a design, and you've entered something in, you've given the Matboard number, and they've agreed to that. But then if during the design process your Matboards increase and now the size that you have is over that, it's going to say check for oversize availability. And they need to flip over that Matboard, check the other number that's on the back of the Matboard, and type that number in. In some cases, it'll have an 8 in front of it. In some cases, it'll have an L or an X after the number, and that's all you need to do to change it. But if they don't change it, it stays at this price. So one of the things that you can do is that if you want to, you can go back to the code tables and create a code table that simply says nothing over 32 by 40. So if I do this, what happens is that they can only use it to price out the items that are a lot smaller than 32 by 40. Now, when I created this chart called nothing over 32 by 40, you can see that it has this high number in over the 32 by 40. All right, and let's go take a look at the code table on the left-hand side. So there it is, 32 by 40, 72 United inches, nothing in the price. So it won't affect the current price. But the minute it goes over that, it adds in this astronomical number that gets your attention to say, hey, I need to switch this to a different Matboard. So I'm going to click done. So now on the Matboard, in order to combine this with the code table and my markups, I need to click on this small box in the center of the screen here in the blue section under the Matboard pricing, and you can see now that it's combined my regular Matboard pricing, and yet it's going to give me an astronomical number once it goes over the 32 by 40, which is going to let the person know at the design counter that if I do enter in that number now, it's going to give me an outrageous price. All right, anything that's smaller than that is going to come up with the regular retail price. So that's one of the ways that you can use the code table to help people choose the correct mat. Another option that you can do is to say for the 40 by 60s, add that in and say nothing over 40 by 60. By 60 mat. And as I said, the find feature allows you to find anything that's in the program. So I've got a 40 by 60 mat here. My chocolate swirl. Okay, so looking at this particular mat, if I wanted to add a code to my drop-down list, I can type NO. It brings that down to that section of the list. And if I use my little arrow key, I can scroll down to find my nothing over 40 by 60. So that we know that it's going to be a 40 by 60 mat is the largest for that size, and that's all it's going to do. Again, I'm going to click the combined box. All right, and it's going to give me the combined formula and pricing. There we go, United inch area, and there are the retail prices. Now, the other thing you may not want people to do is to use that 40 by 60 for a smaller piece, in which case you can really narrow in that section on the code table. And if I go back to that code table, which in this case has a 40 by 60 in there and the price is 0, I can do the exact same thing for the 32 by 40, adding that on and saying I don't want them to use the oversized mat for the small sizes. And so it only allows the mats to be used for that narrow window of anything between 32 by 40 and 40 by 60. So now if I go back here and I click on this, you'll see reset. Okay, and if you don't see the prices or the prices look strange, always click the reset button so that you can recalculate the prices, and it is calculating the prices that I want just in that narrow section. So not saying that you have to do this, it's just something that you could do. The other option, and this one's a great one for the code tables, so let's go remove that code table out of there. Another one is the mat curve, and there is a handout for you. And if you want to take a look at that handout, this is the pricing on a curve handout. A lot of the prices seem to have a dip in the section in the middle, where if you're pricing, and I've worked with customers before, that clients that I'm trying to get to match their old pricing, and it doesn't quite match, and that's because they were just, arbitrarily choosing the prices that they wanted in there, and they may have been a little bit more of a straight line, or they may have actually had a curve in them. And sometimes you want that curve to match that sweet spot of what are the sizes that you sell the most, and I want it to be a little bit higher in that section. You can create a mat code table, and this is going to go smaller to larger, and it's going to go up in price and then go back down in price, so that you can combine that with the current pricing that you have, and that's going to boost the retail price in the sizes that you use the most. So let's go take a look at how that works. So I'm going to close that one out, and let's go back to the code table. And if I click on here, I have a code table in here. There we go, my mat curve pricing chart. And when I enter that in, you can see how even just with the curve alone, it just adds that little amount in. If I go take a look at the code table in detail, you can see where it started out, and I chose to start at 20, and then it's going up from there and all the way up to, and I did have it going up to 12. I probably would change that to 1150 after looking at the curve, and then go all the way back down again, and then it's going to go down to 0. So it's just creating that little bit of a curve. So the question is, where is your sweet spot? Where's the curve that should be in your program? You can find that out. There is a report that you want to take a look at. And the report that you want to look at is this one here. It's the report by category. And you can achieve this one by going into FrameReady, going back to the main menu, and on the main menu, click on reports. Now this is not a financial report, this is based on your work orders, and you can do this based on the completed date or the created date or your found set of what you had listed in the work order file. If I was to select created, you can enter in your date range on here, and then when you click proceed, it's going to give you 3 different reports. This is the first one. So I'm going to go back to that handout that I have there, so you can take a look at that. And this one is going to tell me over on the right hand side, if you haven't entered in anything other than the word artwork on the work order screen, then that means that you're only going to have one line on here. And you'll have the number that you want, and that's great. At least you got that much information. If on the work order you've changed the word artwork to show all the different types of framing that are coming in, then you're going to have a more detailed report, so that I can look on my report and see that the smallest size I have on here right now is 35 United inches, but it goes up to 125 United inches. Not realistic. Most people do have something in there that might be 18 or 16 United inches going up to 80 United inches or so. So take a look at your range, find out what it is, but then down here at the bottom, you're going to have your average. And in my case, the average is 56. Again, very unusual. Most people, you're going to find your average is going to be around 30 to 44 United inches, someplace in that range. So find out what your average is, and then you're going to know exactly where you want to have that curve going in. So I'm going to move that one down. Let's go back into FrameReady, and I'm going to go right back to the work order screen here. If you're wondering about that artwork, that's where it is. This is where you can click on the word, find all the different items that are in here, change them to say, what is it that you're framing? And that's going to give you more value in that report that we printed out. So if we go back to the price codes file, now that I have that curve added in here, and it's only the curve, I need to click on that combined formula box to put that curve in and compare it. And if we were looking at how that looks, I do have that chart based showing that this is the graph showing that curve that I'm currently using, and this is the older pricing in the blue. Take a look at the Excel spreadsheet, and basically what it does is it gives you the ability to create your chart and test it to make sure that your prices are going up. One of the things I found was that if I had something going from 55, and you can click on this show more details if you wanted to see it in detail over here. But if I had a 5x7 and the next one was a 6x7, then what it might do is it might show that maybe there's a drop in price if your curve goes up or down too fast. So you can check it on that Excel spreadsheet that's in the handouts. You can the classes and listen to Jay Goltz. He has a specific formula that he uses, and one of the things you can do in FrameReady is that you can add that in as well. So he has a formula that he uses to calculate out the labor, and I'm going to go into that right now. And that is another one of those handouts if you decided that you wanted to download that and try it out. During the class, he gave out some numbers that, 10-minute fixed price. Any of these digits at the bottom in the pale yellow are ones that you can change. So if you feel that it should be 11, then you can set it to 11. Or if your shop rate is not 60, if your shop rate is 75, change it. Go ahead. If your shop rate is 80, then it's going to calculate out, and this is what you would enter into your code table. This pink section, pink is for pricing, and you would create a code table based on the XY value or the United Inch value that's telling you that this is the amount that you would charge based on that size. So you can create that code table and use it in combination with FrameReady to combine the formula, and he usually puts his flat rate markup in at 2.5 to 3 plus the labor. But he has another thing that he does, and he usually only prices out for either a quarter sheet, half a sheet, or a whole sheet. FrameReady doesn't do that. It actually is going to price it out based on the actual size that you're using. So that is a little bit of a variation there for you. So that is the other handout that you have, and another way to use the code tables combined with the markup and the set price in FrameReady. The next item that we have is the pricing options and defaults. And as I mentioned, once you've created that amazing formula that you have and you want to use price, hold your mouse over top of the pricing options and defaults, press down on the shift key, click once on that, and that's going to apply that new formula that you've just created to your pricing options and defaults. Over on the right-hand side, you need to mark the box for the default, and then if it automatically, and it will automatically enter in whichever mat you happen to be on, if this is going to be your generic default, then you would not have anything listed in the section on the right for the dimensions or the supplier, because this is the one that's going to be applied to everyone. However, you should only have one of those. And I'm going to delete that one for now. Okay, and I'm going to go up to the top of the screen. Up at the top of the screen, click on the gray section here where it says show defaults only. This is going to show you all of the items in here that have an X in the box for default and are on your list. Now below that, it'll identify whether it's the default for Matboard or it might be the default for your fabric pricing. So we don't, you couldn't do a find actually if you want to say find all the ones that are default for just fabric or just Matboard, and then press the enter key and it finds just my Matboard defaults that I'm actually using. One of these on here, it doesn't have to be the top one of the list, but one of them needs to be your generic one that's applied to everyone. If you don't have a generic one, FrameReady will use the default pricing from FrameReady to price out your Matboard. So if you're missing a default, it will actually use the defaults from FrameReady. If you have vendor-specific ones, if you go through and you make a change to this one that's the generic one, you must apply this one first. Okay, but then you also need to go back and apply the ones that are vendor specific, because the generic one is going to override the pricing on the vendor specific ones. So you need to go through and apply those afterwards. Okay, so there is a sequence to that you do need to follow. All right, if you decide that you want to do an increase on your pricing, and I'm going to suggest that you should be looking at your markups at least every 6 months or at least every year. so that you can keep up with the cost of inflation, the cost of living, and don't rely on the vendor wholesale costs to give you your profit. Because if they've dropped the price, then you're actually losing money. And that does happen. If you look at the analysis on the Matboards, sometimes it will show you that. But if they've gone up a little bit, that may not be enough for your area to cover the cost of living. There are a couple of things you can do. One is that you can go up to Perform at the top of the screen, and this is where you would click on the Adjust by a Percentage. And this would give you the ability to increase all of your Matboard pricing by a percentage. My recommendation is type in whatever the percentage is that you want as a decimal, click outside the box to make sure it shows the correct amount, just in case you've typed it in incorrectly and it's going to increase more than you want it to. Okay, make sure the circle is set to increase and then click the proceed button. What will happen is that you will see, same as we saw on the others, a message will appear on all of the Matboards to tell you that the Matboard has been increased as of this date. And it will also appear on the pricing options and defaults, so that when you look at the defaults here, you'll see it on the defaults because all the new Matboard coming in from that supplier needs to have the exact same markup. And that's exactly what it will do. Now, over the years, you may be increasing them a little bit each time. And I know sometimes people might say, well, I want to go back in and I want to clean that up. And I'm just going to find the ones that I've got here. So what I've done is just to show you in comparison, if you have some Matboards and they've got a 2% and a 3% and a 2% and a 1% or whatever it is, and it's accumulated, and you might be tempted to go back and say, I just want to change it to just say it's a 5% increase. Remember that it is an accumulative price increase that you've done over the years. And if we go down to the comparison button down in the bottom left-hand corner, because I have these two Matboards showing on my screen, when I click on the price comparison button and take a look at them, you're going to see that there is a slight difference. This one has the 2 times percentage and then a 3 times percentage on top of that. This one has just the straight 5%. And as the years go by and the percentage is more, it's going to be farther apart if you were to try and just change it. So keep that in mind, that it's an accumulative increase when you're doing that. So those are just some of the tips that I have you on how you can keep your pricing up to date over the years and how you can set your pricing up to be profitable. Chrissy, do we have any questions from anyone?
We don't. With all of that information, I think you covered every inch of pricing. So I think we're good there.
Great. Thank you everyone for attending. We look forward to seeing you again. Bye.
Bye.